Follow the lead of Fresh Start. In 2018, during an international competition, and in that time, we instantly became friends. That was 3 years ago. And throughout that time, we maintained and stayed in touch despite all of us now being at different schools. And yet, something that we all felt was that there was a lack of such a platform dedicated for students in the UAE. A platform where students from different schools can get to know each other, just like how the three of us met. A platform where students can discuss topics of global significance with each other. Therefore, with our vision in mind, we formed the Emirates Youth Platform with three core ideas: collaboration, content, community. We have a simple purpose: to promote conversation and collaboration amongst the youth in the UAE. Starting with just us three, I am proud to say that now we have recognition, ambassadors, applications from over 25 educational institutions across the UAE, as well as having recognition from the KHDA itself. As the future progresses, we only hope to see the student network increase in numbers. And with that, I'd now like to invite our co-founder, Bharat Singh Kohli, to the stage.
Thank you very much, Ishan and Krish. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bharat Singh Kohli, and I'm proud to present myself as one of the co-founders of the Emirates Youth Platform. To speak more on the event itself, we will be having one main speaker and four panelists, ranging from the topics of world markets, environment, social inequality, technology, and of all, mental health. Within each of these topics, the main speaker will present their speech with their array of topics and break it down alongside their panelists in the aims of encouraging collaboration and conversation amongst the youth of today. I'd like to thank all of you for coming along, as we have a great event planned for you. And to start things off, we'd like to bring up onto the stage our first keynote address of the day, Digest AI, and their respective CEO and COO, Kudus Patibada and Adam Nasser. To give a brief description of Digest itself, Digest are on a mission to computationally understand and teach the world of knowledge to students, and aims to help anyone from anything by using proprietary algorithms that summarize and create sets of flashcards on any textbook in the world. Without further ado, let me bring onto the stage our first keynote address. Thank you very much.
In the 5 minutes you spend browsing the internet, scrolling through your phone, every click, every text, every search, every online interaction is a data point that is captured, categorized, and stored amongst the other 44 trillion gigabytes of data generated each year, more than the amount of stars in the observable universe. Connectivity has catalyzed the volume and complexity of content creation. There is so much to learn at any given moment, all at our fingertips. But just as there is this need for us to capture, categorize, and store our data, so is there this need for our knowledge that is available to us in such capacity. But education has failed to keep the pace of technological advancement. We view time as a barrier to learning. So to remove this barrier, to make learning fast and plentiful, we created Digest, an app that integrates AI and machine learning into this industry that has been deprived of innovation for so long. Education. Digest is an app that aims to deliver technology to students that will allow them to better understand study material by surfacing machine-curated explanations. We're able to create flashcards and summaries using nothing more than a picture of text. And through our partnerships with Ignite Institute and Forster Thomas, we are able to provide students with a network of admissions counselors and tutors all in one hub. We are now open for early access, but you must be quick. Audience members, take a moment to check your emails. Online attendees, check the live stream chat. There you'll find a link to the Digest Early Access waiting list. Sign up with your email to secure your spot. To jump ahead in the queue, refer some friends with the generated link. The race has already begun. But the race began 6 months ago by us, the youth. We were designing and planning the future of learning. Together, we created an application that hasn't been created by big tech industry. My name is Khalid Spativara, and this is Adam Nasser. Now, why am I telling you our name again? Well, because you're going to hear a lot more about us. And that's not me being cocky, that's not me being overconfident. That's me recognizing the paradigm shift present in the world today, where the youth are creating companies rather than aspiring to work at them, where the youth is planning the future rather than just being excited to be a part of it. Today, the youth has a different meaning. While in the past it was a word used to undermine or exemplify the lack of ability, today it's used as an advantage. The youth has an edge over the rest of the world because we're part of the future. 10 years ago, the saying was, we should develop solutions for the next generation. Today, it's this generation that should create the solutions. 8 years ago, I was in my first investor meeting. I was pitching an idea for a grocery delivery app. I was laughed out of the room. Today, the world's billionaires and biggest funds are excited to invest in our company because not only are we youth, but we're creating something that nobody has imagined to create because we are who we are. Being a child, being a teenager is no longer a disadvantage in today's world. It's an advantage. There's so much information available for us to consume that Digest aims to filter that information in a way that's unparalleled. Now we're creating something that nobody else has so far, and we're excited to do it. But it's not about us, it's not about you, it's about legacy. So I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Digest, for that wonderful speech. Now we would like to call upon our second keynote speaker of the event, Mr. Monish Ahuja, founder and CEO of Ignite Training Institute. Ignite Training Institute is the leading STEM institute in Dubai. They help students from all age groups who need assistance in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Having specialized trainers for each subject, as well as catering all types of learners in their USP, they have now produced many world toppers in the last 8 years of their existence. They specialize in programs of IBDP, IPMRP, A-levels, and IGSC, covered for all subjects. So ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Mr. Monish Ahuja.
Thank you, Krish, for that wonderful introduction. Hello to everybody, and at the onset, I would like to congratulate every one of you for setting up a beautiful youth platform, which is very much required in today's day. To be honest with you, I'm not here to promote my company. I'm here to tell you about 3 life lessons that I've learned on the journey to creating a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. So let's just dive into it straight away. The first and the most important lesson I've learned is embracing change. Now, you've all heard that change is the only constant, right? You've heard COVID-19 has changed the entire business dynamic everywhere. Technology is changing every time. That's not the change I'm talking about. That change is actually external. You have no input towards that change. That's happening anyways. But your ability to embrace that change is what will separate you from the others. Right? Let me give you a small example. Everyone heard of Google Maps, right? Obviously, right? It's part of your life. It's changed the way we travel all across the globe. Now let's dive into the process of Google Maps. What does it do? It basically, what you do is you enter your destination. It gives you 4 or 5 route options. You select your route and you start traveling. Simple process. But obviously, you will make mistakes on the way, especially here in Dubai. You miss an exit, you take the wrong turn, and stuff like that keeps happening. What does that application do for you? Does it give up on you? It doesn't. What it does is it changes the route and makes sure you reach the final destination. So that's what you should draw inspiration from. What I'm talking about today is embracing change so that you can basically have a fixed final destination and yet keep making mistakes and taking different routes on the way. So the most important learning from this is have a destination, set a goal, have a target. I want to create a Fortune 500 company. I want to be the best doctor in the world. These are good targets to have. Life will automatically take you there. You will make mistakes, you will have different routes, but you will reach your end goal. That's the biggest lesson I've learned so far in my journey as an entrepreneur. The second lesson that I've learned is your ability to increase your risk appetite. What do I mean by that now? Risk is something that is inversely proportional to age. As you grow older, you start taking less and less risks. Obviously, you don't have so many years left in front of you to correct that risk, right? To correct the mistake. So at this young age, the best thing you have in front of you is your ability to take a risk. Let me tell you a small story. I took my first risk when I was 17 years old, way back on 20th of March 2004. I decided after high school, I'll take a gap year. I'll prepare for something called the IIT JEE examination. It requires you to prepare for 12 months, 365 days, for about 14 hours a day. That's about 5,000 academic hours in a year. You need to do that and write an exam at the end of it. So I started preparation in March of 2004. My examination was in April of 2005. That exam is cleared by about 0.5% of the applicants. So 1 in 200 people clears that exam. It required tremendous dedication and risk for me to actually give up that year and try and make myself capable of attempting and passing that examination. But life's not straightforward, right? The exam was scheduled for 15th April 2005. On 9th April 2005, I was diagnosed with a disease called hepatitis A, which is an infection in your liver, which pretty much renders you useless for 2 months. And after taking a year, after putting in 5,000 hours of preparation, I couldn't even write the exam. So that risk at that moment felt like it didn't pay off, it was not worth it. But that's not the truth. 2 months later, when I got out of bed, I thought about what I want to do. And the first thing that came to my mind was that I want to make a company of my own. The other thing that came to my mind is that I've just now put in 5,000 hours of preparation in mathematics, physics, and chemistry. I need to use this. This can't go to waste. So what I decided was that I'll enroll myself into a business management program, a BBA. Most of you know what a BBA is. I'll learn the specifics of business from that, and I'll start tutoring kids so that I can, at the end of the day, create an education company. That day, Ignite Training Institute was born, and here we are today. So that risk did not pay off in terms of me becoming an IITian, just like my elder brother is. But that risk paid off in me creating a company which is heading for immense success in the near future. So risk-taking ability is really, really important. Without taking a risk, you will not be a successful entrepreneur. Point number 3, and probably the most important point again, is build relationships, build friendships. Right? You guys are 14 years old up to 18 years old. People who are watching at home as well are young, are the youth of Emirates. So what I would suggest to you all is build and value friendships. I'll give you a couple of examples. I met my wife about when I was 14 years old. I met her when I was in grade 8. And today, we've been successfully married for 7 years. I know her for 22 years. My business partner, Sumit, is a friend of mine whom I met when I was 16 years old. I'm 36 today. I met him 20 years ago. So my life partner and my business partner, both of them come from the age that you are at the moment. And that is because I trusted my instinct of valuing relationships and valuing friendships. Because the friends that you make right now will stay with you for the rest of your life. These are the checks and balances in your life which will always be there and drive you in the right direction. Once again, I would really like to thank Emirates Youth Platform for doing this. Just a quick word on what we do. I am the founder of a company called Ignite Training Institute. We help students over STEM subjects, and very recently, I partnered with a group called Brighter Education Group. They have 3 companies there. Brighter Prep, I'm sure you've heard of that company. Brighter Prep prepares you for admission, for entrance examinations all across the globe. Brighter Admissions, which prepares you for the admission procedures, for applications to universities, and Go to University, which is a fantastic portal which stores all information about all the courses across the globe for bachelor's and master's. So do take a look, but thank you for your time, and make sure, I'm pretty sure that you're going to be successful in life. Just keep these 3 lessons. The final summary is, make sure that you embrace change by setting goals. If you have a goal, your change will not affect you that badly. Take risks and build relations all along the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahuja, for your brilliant insights for the need of motivation for the students of today. Now it's time to kick it off with the students' speeches and discussions of today. And to start things off, we'd like to bring onto the stage the environment team. The environment team have been working very hard on making sure to cover all aspects of the ever-changing world of the environment and what we as the youth can do to combat its ups and downs. So, without further ado, I'd like to bring onto the stage the main speaker of the environment team, Paridhi Bhatia.
A few days ago, I surprisingly woke up early enough to pick up the newspaper from outside my house. The front page had a huge article talking about the trends in plastic usage. The ironic part was, however, that this newspaper advocating a decrease in plastic use was in fact itself covered in a one-time use plastic. Now, we often see this tendency of people advocating one thing and then going ahead and doing the complete opposite. What we really need is a fresh start. To press that Ctrl Alt Delete and rework our way into a sustainable usage of plastic in our community. So let's begin fresh. What really is plastic? It's anything that can change its shape. Plastic starts out soft and malleable and then can be dried into the desired shape. The plastic we commonly refer to is a synthetic substance made out of natural gas, salt, and crude oils. The reason it's so harmful is due to its property to repel water and leach. Plastic attracts other petroleum-based materials that then break into tinier and tinier pieces called microplastics. Small fish eat that microplastics, causing biomagnification as it passes along the food chain to reach the final consumers, us, humans. Next time you are all headed out for a fancy meal, be sure to try out a fresh salmon curry topped with a garnish of plastic. Or if you're vegetarian, I'm sure you could just have a leafy green salad grown in your favorite plastic-flavored soils. The biggest question, in fact, is what role do we play as the sources of these plastics and the government agencies in regulating the flow of these materials into the waters? Because microplastics remain in the ocean with their toxins forever. Another thing just as hazardous is emissions, the harmful gases released from vehicles and transportation. On average, a car releases 5 tons of carbon dioxide. And those fancy cruises that we all want to go on release the equivalent of around 1 million cars in a year, 1 million. And this carbon dioxide remains in the air unless we incentivize the plantation of trees and increase our forest cover. Due to the emissions, the average annual global temperature has already risen by 1.5 degrees. So, sea levels are rising, glaciers are melting, and low-lying landforms are in serious danger of being underwater. But what we fail to realize is this can all be prevented only if we increase our afforestation and also by reducing our impact on the waters. So, what role do oceans play whatsoever in the greenhouse emissions in the air? Well, the green plants found below the water actually take in 50 to 80% of the total carbon dioxide. And tiny microorganisms called phytoplankton release 20% of the total atmospheric oxygen, which is more than that of all tropical rainforests on land. Adding on to the importance of oceans, we have been recklessly clearing the very thing that sustains life on Earth. On average, we have 46% of the aquatic life that actually died due to being entangled in fish nets. Around 650,000 marine animals, including dolphins, whales, and sharks, die every year due to fish nets. Furthermore, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch actually has 46% of waste only from the fishing industry. How many of you saw that recent Netflix documentary, Seaspiracy? For just 10 to 15 tunas, so many dolphins are killed. So many more are captured and thrown into captivity just for the performance of live shows at marine parks like SeaWorld for the entertainment of all of you. We are standing here talking about sustainability and saving animals, and yet continue to throw them into captivity, continue to destroy the very life that they should be having, all for 3 minutes of clapping and occasionally getting splashed at front row seats of marine parks that promote captivity. And as we get closer and closer to animals, not just the aquatic life, we further our chances for pandemics. So by eating animals, not only are we reducing the biodiversity, but also increasing the incentive for infectious agents like protozoans to pass from the host animals into our bodies, causing more viral outbreaks. In fact, the COVID could have easily been prevented by switching to more vegetarian-based diets. But as the pandemic has been on a high red alert this past year due to the recession and the rapidly declining economy, as well as due to the environment, with the disposal of masks and contaminated biomedical waste, it has, on the plus side, allowed for the free movement of animals that were once in hiding. While humans are under lockdown, something zoo animals face on an everyday basis, it has been an incentive for the environment to regenerate without that looming threat of excessive pollution. And while we reflect on our actions inside our houses, it has promoted sustainable growth. The truth is, in fact, that the environment can easily flourish without us. It's we who need those magnificent trees and pristine waters, without which we will get extinct in a few years. So why do we continuously harm the environment? Why do we throw animals into captivity when we ourselves are unable to restrain from going out, even at the cost of our own health? Why do we continue to use fossil fuels and high-emission cruises when there's an ample amount of sustainable materials? And finally, why do we refuse to stop using plastic when there are freely available natural resources? We have pondered over all of our actions this past 1 year, and it really is time to press that Ctrl Alt Delete and have a fresh start. Because I stand here for the regeneration of this wondrous biome we are blessed with. The question is, do you? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pradeep, for your wonderful speech. I'd like to bring onto the stage the panelists for the environment team, starting with Georgia Lombardi, Sufyan Al-Alami, Saisha Suri, and Aman Siddiqui. Please bring a warm round of applause for the panelists.
We'd now like to open the panel discussion and like to hear your thoughts and insights on the topic.
As we know, COVID-19 very likely emerged due to the invasion of the bat's natural habitat, where we selfishly entered their environment. Now, particularly in the wet markets of Wuhan in China is likely where the first case of coronavirus first occurred. This is because in these wet markets, live and dead animals in tens and thousands are bought and sold through private traders, which are often illegal. After such a hectic and what we could consider chaotic year, it is vital that we, in fact, do not forget or Ctrl-Alt-Delete about our planet. It is necessary that we Ctrl-Alt-Delete our destructive actions towards our planet and put our best foot forward to face climate change. Our world has existed for over 4.5 billion years, and throughout this huge amount of time, Organisms have managed to coexist in what we could call peace and have evolved successfully to what we know of them today. However, as the rise of industrialization has occurred over the past decades, humans have successfully managed to destroy the interdependence between organisms through things like industrial farming and fishing. Now, I would like to shed light upon the dangers of human contact with animals, as well as how destructing their natural habitats contributes to the outbreak of viruses. An example of this, of course, not only COVID, is the mad cow virus, which occurred through the contact of humans in cattle farms, or even viruses that occurred through birds, such as salmonella, chickenpox, or avian flu, all occurred through the direct or indirect contact with humans and animals. All of these viruses are of zoonotic descent, and 3 in 4 of the infectious viruses that exist in the world today are caused due to the direct or indirect contact from humans with the blood of other animals or even their feces and urine. Now, one of the main problems is farming. Due to the rise of the most recent industrialization in the past years, we have successfully managed to deforest 70% of the Amazon rainforest to provide space for cattle farming. Now, not only is this destroying the cattle population, but it is also impacting our environment, as through the destruction of these forests, we are no longer able to absorb the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which obviously contributes to climate change.
The problem with this is that we've had elevated levels of economic growth over the past decade, and one side effect of that are the negative environmental externalities that we face as a result. And as our environment has thrived and our economy has developed and technology has emerged, our environment has been damaged to a substantial level where it's almost irreversible. But one major thing that we could look at now is with COVID-19, the exact opposite has actually happened, where our economy has halted. We've experienced a recession, but our environment has actually had an opportunity to breathe. Flights were halted, carbon emissions fell, and our environment, we could actually see it healing and developing to a point where we had a point where it's a clean slate and we could heal it forever. One important thing to look at now is that how can we move forward after facing this recession through not damaging our environment. As vaccines are getting dished out and flights are being taken again, we have to make an active effort now at the economic growth that we face to try and offset this recession, does not have the major environmental externalities and the major environmental side effects, which will help us develop as an economy and as a whole planet. We could look at entrepreneurs manipulating the supply chain management. We could use clean energy like nuclear, solar, hydroelectric, and we have to look at the government's use of tradable pollution permits and carbon taxation. So we could offset all of this dangerous environmental chaos that we're enduring through economic growth and through healing our economy at the same time. It's now where we can make an active effort to change.
Like Georgia mentioned, you have the pervasiveness of the commercial farming, of intensive fishing. How do you think that we can sort of minimize and curtail the impacts of that? Because as easy as it is to say, go vegan, go vegetarian, we know that the food options are a little bit overpriced in comparison to the meat and dairy options that we have. What do you think can be the most sort of feasible way to overcome that and be on the path towards more sustainable and environmentally friendly consumption from us as consumers?
I completely agree with the majority of people saying that they can't actually lead a plant-based diet. However, I do agree that humans, since their existence almost, we've had a both plant and animal-based diet because we are omnivores. However, I'm not saying that we should stop eating animals. It is only from the past decade that we've truly demolished our environment almost through the intensive industrial farming and industrial fishing. So I'm not saying that we should stop eating animals. I'm saying that we should stop treating animals in the way that we are, and we should stop extensive farming and extensive fishing that truly will lead to the end of human existence on Earth.
Those are some excellent points mentioned, and I really appreciate that, because when it comes to making change with the environment and making sure people are adopting sustainable practices, it isn't just one discipline we're tackling. It is not possible to just go out there and talk about saving the environment and how it's better for everyone, whether it's for humans or whether it's for the different biomes or whether it's for other life organisms. There are several other factors that have to be considered for change to be realistic and for change to be sustainable. Since we know that vegan options cost more, when we go out and talk about the environment, we also address economics with it. We address religious factors with it. We address social factors. We have to look at cultural implications. We have to look at what's available in a particular society, whether the alternatives are going to be feasible for them, and multiple other factors. So really, considering the multidisciplinary nature of the field is also very important.
So if we begin looking nationally, we have the UAE, which has started with the Global National Climate Change Plan, and this was ratified in 2017, and it sort of acted as a roadmap to bolster international climate change mitigation around the world. It aimed to act as sort of a network and sort of a beginning of legislation with aims to reduce carbon emissions by 2 degrees in the UAE, and then internationally we have the Paris Climate Accord, with the USA being the only country that wasn't signed to it in Trump's administration. However, when we had Biden, within his first week, he signed back into it, and this does sound good, and this does sound like we are on the verge of progressive climate change. However, it also shows that it is an extremely volatile topic. You have governments of the day sort of signing in and signing out of this accord, which is so influential, so pervasive, and it creates a platform for countries all over the world to come in and sort of dish out their ideas and act legally binding towards reducing carbon emissions. And when you have a country like the US not present or present and then not present, it really raises concerns as to whether climate change is on the forefront of their missions as the government itself. So this isn't something that should be a partisan issue. This isn't something that should change with the governments that are in office. This is something that is bipartisan and something that should be agreed upon wholly by the government firstly, and then the citizens acting alone.
And I agree 100%. But one thing we do need to look at is that no matter what type of individual effort we can make to offset climate change, these major multinationals, which are given a pass by governments, are allowed to pollute and destroy our environment, and to a level which is incomparable to the small amount of things like our mini pollution that we do and our plastic bags that we use at the supermarket. However, at the same time, it's important not to undermine these many issues. And as well as us making a small change, we have to look at our governments to make a mega impact and regulate the type of pollution that major multinationals and huge companies can do across the world. What do you think are some small efforts that we can make individually to offset climate change?
Well, of course, these were some very important points made, and I'm so glad that we've discussed the role of governance as well, and ultimately address the multidisciplinary nature of this field. And apart from that, there's also the question of what can we as individuals do. It might be easy to blame governance and policy sitting in air-conditioned rooms, but it also comes down to what we as individuals go. So before we close off this panel, that's a question I want to leave with all listeners. What can you as an individual do to improve your sustainable practices individually and in the community to live in? So thank you for listening, and we hope you have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you very much to the environment speaker and panel for elucidating not only the plethora of environmental issues that exist today in the world, but also how it affects the global and wider community. We now move on to the topic of world markets, from foreign relations to digital currencies. The last few months in the world has witnessed a significant shift in not only the growth of markets, but their very nature. So without further ado, I'd now like to invite our main speaker for this topic, Theo Abramo.
Political economy is what shapes our world. As our society evolves and progresses, there have been three fundamental occasions that catalyzed a shift into a new era, completely transforming our modern way of life. A shift that created a clear gap between the countries who were able to adapt and those who weren't. A gap that can never truly be filled. These three fundamental occasions are referred to as industrial revolutions, generating significant changes in balance of power, international competition and cooperation, and most importantly, our global markets. Now, these can be summarized in phases, beginning with the creation of steam power, which completely transformed our economy, creating a sectoral shift from agriculture to industry life. We went from economic systems being based on agriculture and handicrafts to large-scale manufacturing, completely changing the way society operates. Now, don't get me wrong, this new technology made industries infinitely more productive and efficient, but at what cost? You see, the first industrial revolution happened almost 170 years ago, and we are still fighting for some of the problems it created, like poor working conditions, poor living conditions, low wages, child labor, pollution. Then, we advanced the second industrial revolution of electricity, telephones, and mass production, bringing about the arrival of the digital revolution with electricity, personal computing, mainframe computing, and of course, the internet. And that created a whole new set of problems of its own, from energy consumption to cybersecurity. In the near future, we will encounter yet another industrial revolution, powered by the digitalization of our financial system. This revolution is the fusion of technologies between the physical, biological, and digital spheres. And to an extent, COVID-19 accelerated this shift. Now, let me explain. Why is this true? COVID-19 pushed the world into recession. It completely transformed the way we use the internet. We went from using the internet for a quick Google search in class, entertainment on weekends, and occasionally chatting to friends and family on WhatsApp, to it being our only source of communication with the outside world, and for most, their only source of income. The pandemic forced the world to go digital or go dark. Businesses had to make effective, yet brutal transitions, converting everything online if they wanted to survive. In a world of trepidation, isolation, and mandatory lockdowns, digitalization played a pivotal role in bridging the gap between a pre-COVID-19 era and our new reality, keeping businesses and society afloat. Why is this true? Some businesses will revert to their traditional business models when the crisis abates. Others may opt for a hybrid approach when they recognize the benefits of recurring revenues. For example, if we look at China and the way it handled the SARS pandemic in 2003, the fact that this pandemic was so bad and the death rates were so high that people imposed a self-quarantine in fear of the virus. Sounds familiar? Alibaba, a small company at the time, launched Taobao, a completely digital platform that allowed people to sell their goods online. And soon after, Alipay, which essentially is a third-party mobile payment system that was created to help solve transaction and trust issues that inhibited the growth of e-commerce at the time. A huge problem for China. This company, post-pandemic, decided to further develop this technology. It's currently worth $500 billion and is one of the leaders in the shift to digital payments. Digital payments like Alipay, WePay, Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Baidu Wallet, QQ Wallet, all are part of China's economy and act as a backbone to its success. And some might even argue that it could be considered public good. So I'm here asking you, what prevents other countries with already existing infrastructures to do the same in a post-coronavirus world? Thank you.
Thanks to you. Now I'd like to invite our wonderful panel for this topic, which consists of Ibrahim Asmani, Yashira Saxena, Aryan Shakur, and Ayush Dasanacharya.
Hi everyone. So we'd like to begin our panel discussion with our first question, which is why are other nations with already existing infrastructure not able to do the same as China, which is digitizing their economies to the same extent as China in a post-COVID-19 world?
Well, in my opinion, the first reason is comfort. Everybody's already comfortable with the existing payment structure with physical money. It'll be very hard for people to transition into a digital economy and will require a lot of money and a lot of input from governments. People simply aren't prepared to put in the effort that is required to make this transition, and thus will cause them to falter.
I'd say another thing that limits people from going digital or dark, as Leo said, is infrastructure. As in, you look at low-income countries in Africa, not every single grocery store has a digital payment system, and that hinders them from being able to accept payments via people's phones. And comfort is obviously a really big thing. I mean, you walk around, you've got 5 dirhams in your pocket, you're able to pay for your McDonald's, and that smoothness is something that can't be replaced really easily.
Yeah, I think for countries that already have the infrastructure, the main thing is culture. The main thing is it's quite weird to stop using cash. I think Ayush was telling me before that in China, in the major cities of China, like Shanghai, there's no cash. No one uses cash. And just thinking about that is weird. To think that in the entire city or even in the entire country, no one uses cash is quite alien. I think that's the biggest barrier for countries that already have the infrastructure. But in terms of countries in general, in barriers in general, the main thing is infrastructure. And I guess smartphone ownership is part of infrastructure. But just for some context, Pakistan, I know, there's 20% of people own a smartphone. And that's only 20%. It's 1 in 4. And while numbers might be a bit higher for phones in general, that's still a very low number. And that's a huge barrier to digitalize the financial sector. If people don't have phones, don't have the tech, then how are you going to use tech, right? And I'm sure the numbers are similar throughout the region as well as in Latin, South America and in Africa. So I think that's the biggest barrier.
Yeah, that's a really good idea because there aren't that many nations in the world that sort of have the same infrastructure as China and America that have the capability of sort of digitizing their entire economy to the same extent. Moving on, how do you think China's dominance in digital currency affect the global order?
I think that's a really good point to bring up because the USA at this point, which is the global standard, I mean, everything is benchmarked against the US dollar. The USA right now is an inflation nation, right? The US Federal Reserve has, they gained 500 billion to 1 trillion US dollars by underreporting inflation by 1%. And so they have a lot to gain and very little to lose by underreporting inflation. And we've seen this everywhere, lumber prices forward have gone up 70+% in the last 3 months. So, if you're a homeowner in the USA and you want to get some repairs done, or if you want to build a home, it is suddenly 70% more expensive for you to do that. For phone manufacturers, copper prices have gone up 40%. And, at this point, it's like they are printing so much US dollars that it's devaluing at rate faster than, is available with other currencies. And I think that's going to cause, a competition to the US dollar. You don't want to put your entire net worth in something that's monopoly money, right? So going ahead, I think we're going to see a real shift in the paradigm that is the power that the US dollar holds in terms of being the global benchmark in regards to currency.
I think competition in general, it's, for the US, throughout US superpower era, they haven't had much economic competition. The Cold War was mainly competition in terms of military capacity, so between the US, but China, for the first country, I think in the era of US being the superpower, there's a lot of pressure on the US in terms of economic capacity of the country. And I think you see this, this pressure already coming up with Biden already in his first speech to Congress, with his proposed plans of firstly the American job plan and the families plan, I believe it is. The way he was trying to convince the Republicans was citing China. And he was telling the Congress, the Republicans, we have to pass this because we want to compete with China. I think that's a direct way you see how China's dominance in financial services, as well as just in China's rise in general, it's putting a lot of pressure on the US. And personally, I think competition, or at least some competition, is good. And whether you think these plans are good or not, I just think competition in general, and whether that threatens the global order, whether it changes it, that's depending on how these two countries react really.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I find it extremely interesting you talked about the Cold War. And it's true that if you think about it, after the Cold War and the USSR's defeat, as we can say, the USA has been left undefeated. And I think the difference between, there's such a big difference between the values and cultures between China and the USA is so different that it will disrupt our world. I mean, as we've seen already with Europe and other countries, the US-China trade war has already played a huge impact in their economy. But moving forward, as China is now a leading member in this shift to completely digital payments, as you mentioned, and I just find it extremely interesting to find the role between which countries are going to be able to come on top of this race and the potential impact this will have on the international liberal order that was established, per se, by the United States post-Cold War era.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen how a lot of people have been investing in cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum from their skyrocketing share prices over the past few months, and how they're moving from investing in the more conventional like gold or just US dollars to cryptocurrencies. Now, my next question is, how do you think the digitalization of the economies around the world would lead to financial inclusion?
Theo said it best, go digital or go down. I think we've seen this reciprocated across every single asset class, every single market you can think of. The Federal Reserve is keeping rates so low that you just don't want to keep your money in a safe place anymore, because you are losing money since inflation's higher than the interest rates are. So people are going out, they're investing in stocks. We've all seen what's happened in GameStop. That was crazy, right? And we've all seen what's happened with cryptocurrency. Bitcoin has been on a trip of its own, 620% up, year to date, right? And I think this decentralization of finance, this shift away from, going to a traditional centralized banking institution, to put your money aside and let them play with it for you. I think that's going to shift to, something that's decentralized, right? Banks have defrauded people for quite a while now. We saw it in 2008, we saw it before that, and this has been going on. And, if we're moving away from something that is, less focused towards the guys at the top making all the money, and we're going towards something that is, in the public eye, that is definitely going to be, something that's going to be moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I completely agree. Because, like you said, it's about decentralization. In our parents' and grandparents' days, what their advice was to do with money was to spend some of it and save some of it. Recently, you're becoming in charge of your own money. You're not putting your faith in banks or the central bank. You, like he said, you can invest in stocks and take charge of what you want to do with your money. This is basically giving power to people. I mean, you're allowing them the freedom to spend it in the economy, to boost the economy, or if they want to, keep it in something more safe.
We hear like decentralization good, centralization bad, but I know you alluded to it a bit. But if you could explain why centralization is not seen as a positive.
So centralization, I mean, personally, I think is not a good move. Mainly because of the fact that people can manipulate it to do things that they want to do. You know, we don't, as humans, we don't look towards something that is necessarily right. We look towards figures that are authoritative. You know, you would be much happier, you know, going to someone that asserts power, asserts confidence, than you would going towards someone who is, you know, weaker, say. And I think, you know, having all of, you know, a person who controls everyone's money is obviously going to want to make themselves a little shed on the side, right? So it's something like that where, you know, you've got everything in the public eye, in the public domain, you know, that reduces fraud, that reduces, you know, the ability of someone to take the numbers, to take the facts and twist them to what they want them to be. I think that ability absolutely stops.
Can you think that devil's advocate here? Is it feasible for us? Is it a sustainable way? If we look at Bitcoin alone, already consume in a year, the transaction consume more electricity than all of Argentina combined. And if we talk about, don't even get me started on NFTs and all this new technology, it consumes way too much energy. Can we, as a planet, who are already struggling with growing impacts of our reckless consumption like climate change, is this feasible to consider this as a long-term growth, as a long-term strategy in development? Is it even feasible and sustainable?
Well, first of all, I think it could be sustainable because by digitizing the economy, yes, we would be using more energy, but have you thought about the number of the notes that are printed like every day by the reserve banks of nations that are used by people? That would be like drastically reduced. So there would be negatives, but I think the positives would sort of overpower it, and it would, in the long term, be a more sustainable.
I think she brought up a good point there because, you know, on the longer term thing, Bitcoin miners, you know, people who verify transactions on the Bitcoin blockchain end up making more money and being sustainable just because of the fact that, you know, they're running at a capacity that ends up making them a technical economy of scale, right? You know, the average costs are brought down to the point where it is genuinely sustainable for them to be using that much electricity and for them to be putting that much back into the blockchain by verifying that many transactions and, you know, making sure that the blockchain is secure.
I think if we don't mind, back to the original question of financial inclusion, I think one thing is important is to realize how important financial inclusion is. And the way I like to think about it, it sort of bridges the gap between incentive and ability. And what I mean by that is the rich, the upper class, the top 1%, we say, they have the most ability to innovate, to go out on business ventures, to take risks, because, well, they have more security. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. The poor, however, they're unable to do that, but they have the most incentive. They have the most to gain, they're at the bottom of the pyramid, and poverty is a quite vicious cycle. And so they have clearly the most incentive to come out of it. And what financial inclusion allows people, the poor especially, to do is access finance, access capital, to allow them to come out of that vicious cycle and come into the middle class and innovate, run businesses. And back to the overall theme, it seems like financial and digitalization of it, of the financial sector. FinTech seems to be a very significant player in helping with that. And we talked about it a bit, it seems like. We talked about how all you need is very low cost, it's quite efficient, you just need a smartphone, and it makes it quicker. You don't have to go to a central bank to have access to this, and that's very important for economic development, and it allows people, it gives the people opportunity to rise, which is kind of what we want, what governments want. Yeah.
And you know, that's a good point, financial inclusion, right? Since going digital, you know, it helps poor people, you know, people who need capital the most, get access to it, right? If I showed up to a bank, you know, in rags, you know, they'd laugh me out, right? I wouldn't be able to get a loan, I wouldn't be able to open a bank account, none of that would happen. However, websites like Fiverr, organizations that let you loan money to people who need it the most. Stuff like that helps, right? They've got a 96% repayment rate. And they're positively affecting people's lives around. Microfinance is one thing that's going to be, instrumental in development going ahead.
All right, so I think we've discussed some great ideas here today. To end the panel discussion, I would like to leave you with a thought. Who do you think is going to lead the fourth industrial revolution? Will it be the American giants of Google and Facebook, Amazon, or will it be the growing Chinese companies that we've talked about today? Thank you.
Thank you to the world market speaker and panel. You all were very insightful in your different analysis of the different areas within world markets. So thank you very much for that. So far, we've had an excellent afternoon hearing about topics from entrepreneurship to environment to world markets. We'd now like to take a short 25-minute break, after which we will resume the event. Thank you very much.
Please make your way over here.
ഇത് ഇതന്നെ ഫുൾ ഹൈഡ് വെക്കണം എന്നാലും നല്ല ഇതോടെ കിട്ടുന്നില്ലേ മാറ്റുക അവിടെ ഇത് വരുന്നുണ്ട് ആ തലയുടെ ഇല്ലേ അത് കുട്ടിയുടെ അതാ ഇട്ടിട്ട് നീ ഞാൻ ബന്ധോ അവരുടെ ക്യാമറ വീഡിയോ അയച്ചു വീഡിയോ
Thank you.